Okay, so what we are doing today is we are recording a set of interviews, not just one, but a series of smaller questions with my friend and also today my colleague, Mike, um, who is living with bipolar disorder. And what we're going to do with these as we record them in July of 2021 is they're going to be used right now for Psych 1. It's a summer class. They might also be used in future classes for sort of similar tasks. So this semester, they're going to be used for their final exam about applying psychological concepts to real life situations. So that's what they're going to be doing. What they have done to prep for this is you've written them an introduction to yourself, and in exchange, they've written you some questions that I have sorted into categories. And the way that we've decided to do this is to kind of read some of the questions verbatim, but other questions just kind of combine really nicely into themes. Before we get started, I have to say, even though you are not my client, I still, as this is in the course of my employment, and I am a mandated reporter, if we have any conversations in which I suspect child or elder abuse, or anything in which I feel like I have a duty of care to you, then understand that
Right.
we're going to have to deal with some fallout of that. But we're going to talk about it if it comes up.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
I've
Cool.
been part of the system for 30 years. I'm well aware how that works.
Absolutely. But you're also well aware that every time a conversation like this happens, that needs to be said
Right.
again.
Right.
Yeah.
Of course.
It's a little bit like being read your rights by the police, but hopefully less terrible.
Or your lack
Okay.
of rights, as the case
Or
often
your
is.
lack of rights. We'll get to that actually. We have a question about that.
That's actually one of our questions. Yeah, we were going to get to that.
It
Yeah.
is one of our questions. Okay. So like I said, the format is we're gonna do it by category. And I think what we decided was to start with what bipolar disorder looks like. And we've divided those questions from the students into two categories, which are symptoms and interpersonal relationships.
Mhm.
I think it probably makes most sense to start with symptoms
I think so too. Yeah, absolutely.
and to kind of talk about that. So all
Sure.
of these students should have done their reading about bipolar disorder, so they should know on paper what it looks like. But actually, one of the first questions that they asked, which was really, really good question,
I
was,
loved it, actually.
what does it look like to you? So I'm just
What
going
did,
to let you
yeah.
talk on it.
I think his or her exact words were, I don't want the clinical and dull definition of bipolar disorder. And I think that
Yeah,
was a
yeah,
brilliant, I think that was a brilliant way to say that, because nothing about bipolar disorder is dull. It can be quite clinical, of course, but it's never a dull day in the life, really. And like your students kind of touched on, it is the idea of mania and depression, right? I mean, that's clinically how you get diagnosed is bipolars. You can have uh, 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 certain disorders that might get misdiagnosed, but as soon as you start triggering those manic episodes, that's the key in to the you've got the bipolar, right? Unfortunately, there's no blood test, genetic test, whatever. It's just you have to actually talk to somebody, which is the hardest part. But what are those symptoms? Was your actual question? Um, Mania can look like anything. A lot of times for me, it's impulsiveness, complete loss of judgment, and uh, sort of self preservation instinct that we normally have as human beings kind of goes out the window. A lot of risk taking, a lot of really poor financial choices, a lot of substance abuse choices. Um, that's sort of what the mania, people think of it as like, oh, you're just bouncing off the walls and hyper and crazy. And it's like, yeah, that can be part of it. I used to joke my house was never cleaner than when I was in a manic episode. Uh, because there is that overabundance of energy that you just don't know what to do with. But that ends up hurting you because your sort of gatekeepers are, taking their 2 weeks off, and what do I do with this energy becomes unfortunate in a lot of those cases. The flip side of that is the lows, which is the depression side of it, which I think people are more common or more aware of what depression looks like. And, even if you're not clinically depressed, everyone has been depressed. It's a key difference I think your students need to understand is there is a difference between clinical depression and just being depressed. If your dog dies, yeah, you're going to get depressed. If you have depression, that can last for weeks, months, even years. And that can look like a lot of things. That can look like suicidality. That can look like job loss, friend loss, relationship loss. That can look like giving away things, giving up things, lack of interest in hobbies, no energy to do simple self-care like bathing or brushing your teeth. That can look like a lot of different things. And that's kind of, those are the big red flags there. Is like for me personally, like right now, I'll be totally honest with your students, it's been probably 3 or 4 days since I've had a shower, because I just don't have the energy right now. Like, it's just not in my spoon bank. I just don't have the spoons for it right now. And we'll get to what that means later, I think. But yeah, so those are kind of the basic symptoms, at least in my experience. And again, just to make this clear, in case it wasn't, I am not a licensed anything. I have been dealing with this my entire life. I turned 39 in 5 days.
Yeah,
Yay.
you do.
I know. And so yeah, I'm getting older. And one thing I've noticed, speaking of symptoms, as I'm getting older, the symptoms are getting worse, which has been interesting. And I'm actually dealing with my therapist and my psychiatrist right now about whether or not that's psychosomatic, whether it's medication related, whether it's just general getting older malaise, whether it's, A, B, C, D, or E. And it could just very well be a combination, which is more often the case, right? Is people with bipolar tend to get, much like people on the spectrum of autism, it's you get overwhelmed really easily. You get 1 or 2 or 3 little tiny minor things, but to you, all of a sudden, it's just one too many, and the camel's back, proverbially breaks, so to speak. So I think I answered that question, hopefully.
No, I think you did, and I also think that the next one is a really good segue, which is the warning signs of when the question is actually about a manic episode, but actually I think how I'd like to ask it is warning signs of either a manic episode or a depressive episode.
Sure. This is something that my therapist and I talked at great length about. And when you look at the sort of sine wave of your mental state, right? A normal person, which I know, don't yell at me, their sine wave sits at a certain level. Whereas somebody with bipolar disorder, and really any mental health disorder, their sine wave isn't going to look like that. With bipolar specifically, the peaks and valleys of that sine wave are going to be much greater, differentiated. And so the trick with bipolar, and something that I still struggle with, is noticing when it starts to dip past a certain level or up past a certain level, right? And catching it then, rather than catching it when you're already at 80%, right? Because then it's just too late and you're gone. So what does that look like? For the depression side, again, that's easy because we're more familiar with it. We understand it better. You do just tend to having less energy. You'll find yourself, the intrusive thoughts, which I'm sure is a phrase that your students have heard or learned, or at least I hope so, will start to creep up. And intrusive thoughts can look like anything. It doesn't have to be like, hey, grab that knife. Like, it doesn't have to be that, although a lot of times it is. They can be anything like, hey, you're a piece of shit, right? Like, just any kind of thing that just starts popping up into your head is a huge warning sign of like, all right, well, where's this coming from? And how am I going to, try to deal with this? And for me, it is that hamster wheel. I call it my hamster wheel. I think you've probably heard me use that expression before, where literally, if you just imagine a little hamster in my head running on his wheel, and it's those same negative self thoughts just over and over and over again as that wheel spins. So that's kind of the depressive side of it. And those are kind of the key things to look for: is energy level and the intrusive thoughts. I think are the two biggest things that it's like, okay, hold on, I'm dipping, you know. On the flip side, for the manic, that's a lot harder to pin down, because mania does present in so many different ways and so many different people. There's no one like concrete answer I can give you for what a manic episode looks like or will start to look like. But a lot of it is like when you make that first excuse me, sort of impulsive buy that you couldn't really afford, or you know, do that thing that you're like, wait, why, I didn't really want to do that, why did I do that? Your brain kind of starts to go, oh, here we go. Yeah, that's where we're headed. And I just, as you know, at the beginning of June, I believe it was, had a really bad manic episode. And I saw it coming and I knew it was coming. And by the time I even realized that I should do something about it, I was already full blown gone. I mean, it was bad. It was the worst manic episode I've had in a very, very long time. And on the tail end of that, I'm now dealing with one of the worst depressions I've had in quite a while, which is sort of the implied question to your students' question of what does that look like. Is, yeah, you can only run on adrenaline and endorphin for so long. I mean, even biochemically, you can only run on dopamine and adrenaline for so long before your body tuckers out. You know, and you basically go into systematic shock, which becomes a very severe depression on the other side of it. I'm trying to use clinical terms, but yeah.
You don't have to use clinical terms.
Yeah, but I know them, so I want to feel smart.
Okay, that works.
Just let me have this, Lark. Or professor, sorry.
I think Lark is fine. Okay, so I want to touch on this one aspect that I think people can get confused about very easily, which is the idea that manic episodes are fun.
Yeah. Yeah, okay.
Can we talk about that a little bit?
Have you ever ridden a roller coaster more than like 2 or 3 times in a row?
No.
Yeah, so it stops being fun at that point. And you start getting nauseous and you just feel like you're gonna die. And that, I think, is the best way to explain a manic episode. Is, yeah, those first 2 or 3 goes on the zip line, sure, but 5th, 6th, 7th time, your adrenaline is so fucking spiked, excuse me, or your heart rate and everything. You know, it's not fun to be in that constant state. It would be like, I don't even have any way to compare it to, but no, there's nothing fun about it. And it's also, it's a excuse me, it's a loss of control, which isn't fun either.
Yeah.
You know, so not only is the physical toll just taxing, again, just biochemically, but you know, the physical toll is just exhausting. But the mental toll of not feeling in control, having no, you know, and then looking at your bank account day after day and going, where'd all my money go? And, you know, not being able to pay your bills, not being able to eat because you literally are just bouncing off the walls. I mean, you know, there's nothing fun about it. That's ridiculous. And while we're on the topic, I just want to get this off my chest, which we'll probably touch on at some point anyway, but I just want to get this out of the way now. The idea that bipolar people are just like, I'm mad, I'm happy, I'm mad, I'm happy, that our media has liked to convince us is the case. Of, you know, you see it in TV shows and movies all the time where somebody will get upset, often for a very valid reason, 99% of the time, and the response to it is always like, oh, bitch went bipolar on me. And that, more than anything, will get me in a boxing ring with you. Like, stop doing it. It's not funny, it's not fair, it's invalidating, it's inaccurate. And for people who actually have these diseases and actually have these disorders, it's I mean, it's the biggest insult and the biggest slap in the face you could possibly say. So, you know, it just stop, like, just in your everyday parlance. You know, we got the R word out of it. You know, we're starting to get all these words out of our vocabulary, but we're still, the stigma with the mental health is still there. So
yeah,
anyway,
I mean, we're still hearing things like spaz, right? Like, if you think about that, that's
what?
a no. Spaz.
Oh, spaz. Yeah, even spaz. Yeah, spastic. Sure.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
That's a no.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I think it's worth paying attention to language. Okay, so we are almost done with symptoms, but there's one thing that's left on this one that I want to cover, and I'm going to read this one. My dad has many bouts of energy, but by the middle of the week, he crashes for days at a time. Was this something you also dealt with throughout your life?
100%. 100%. Like I kind of touched on earlier. Excuse me. Haven't talked this much in a while. The bouts of energy they're not necessarily manic episodes, right? So for a bipolar person, even baseline can feel like a high because you've been so depressed for so long, right? It's just the sort of comparison or the dichotomy of a severe depression to just normal. All of a sudden you feel like have all this energy in the world because you haven't for so long. And again, these are not day-to-day, hour-to-hour changes. I cannot stress that enough. These are weeks and days at a time that you're going through these different peaks and valleys, if not months. So yeah, no, that's something I've fought with my whole life. Lark, as you well know, I have a sleep issue where I will literally hit my peak of being human, and I will curl up for 3-4 days at a time and not get out of bed. No, like not even to drink, eat, or potty. Like I literally will just pass out for 3 or 4 days.
I think the worst I saw was 6 days.
Yeah,
that's the worst I've seen.
That's one of the worst ones. Yeah, and it's been happening a lot more lately. And again, like I said, I've been having a lot more severe symptoms the past year and a half. I wonder why. What happened in the last year and a half that would make everyone, I don't know, weird.
Funny how that is.
Yeah.
By the way, students, there's a whole lecture on that. So there's a whole lecture on executive function, stress, and mental health that you should go watch.
Especially during the apocalypse or pandemics,
right?
Or whatever.
Exactly. Yeah.
My therapist made the comment to me that, because I was telling her how I was feeling kind of midway through last year, and she was like, just stop. Like, I just need you to know that even your mental health providers are now seeking out mental health. Like everybody, everybody is.
We're all in therapy.
Right. But it was just, her point was like, don't feel like you're the only one this is like driving, up a wall. Like everybody is feeling the burden of this. Like we're all dealing with this in our own way. And for some of us, that way is worse than others. But yeah, so students, so if you feel like the last year and a half has been overwhelming, or you just, you're putting yourself down for not handling it as well or whatever, none of us are handling this well. Nobody is handling this well, and that's okay. It's okay to not be okay. So again, I'll get off my soapbox.
It is okay to not be okay. Absolutely. That's worth repeating. It's okay to not be okay, everybody.
It really is.
Yeah. Okay, so that is the end of what it looks like for symptoms. I think what I'm going to do is start a new one for interpersonal relationships. Okay.
Was I rambling too much? We got shorter videos.
Nope. I just want to make it digestible.